Welcome to episode 153 of Real Health Radio. You can find the links talked about as part of this episode at the show notes, which is www.7, so the word all spelled out, seven-health.com/153.
Welcome to Real Health Radio. Health advice that's more than just about how you look. And here's your host, Chris Sandel.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Real Health Radio. So I can confirm that another solo episode is finally going to happen next week. It feels like it's been ages since I've had time to sit down and write. I actually put out a new blog post this week, and that has been a while since one of those has gone out. With all the public holidays and Easter, and then I was away, and then our nanny was away, and then she was sick, and then Allie's been sick. There's just been many weeks where I've been parenting for full days during the week. And when that happens, the writing kind of is the first thing to go. But I'm hoping that we are now over a hump with all this and should be starting to see more blog posts and more solo podcasts finally. But for today's show, it is a guest interview, and my guest today is Kotecki. So Kayla is a non-diet holistic nutritionist, author, and influencer who helps people to stop feeling crazy and uncontrollable around food. She teaches how to overcome the diet-binge-purge cycle by showing people the tools needed to heal their relationship with food and their body in order to gain their life, health, and freedom back. She wants to help guide people back from the mental and physical damage and programming that is done from the media, modern society, the health and fitness industry, and other various popular fad diet trends. So I've been aware of Kayla for a while now. I can't remember when it was. It was probably a year ago maybe. I was chatting with Matt Stone, and he mentioned Damn the Diets, which is Kayla's website. Then more recently, one of my clients mentioned Kayla and how helpful she'd been finding watching all of Kayla's YouTube videos. And so I decided to make my own way through her blog and her YouTube channel, and I liked what Kayla was putting out, so I reached out and invited her on the show. And this episode is largely covering Kayla's story. So we talk about her struggles with an eating disorder and her subsequent recovery. We go through certain details about why this happened or predisposing factors, so things like vanity or appearance being modeled to Kayla as being important. We talk about dieting and the many things that Kayla tried in an attempt to rebuild her health, and we also talk about things like CBT that Kayla found helpful as part of her recovery journey. So let's get on with the show. This is my conversation with Kayla Kotecki. Hey Kayla, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Chris, for having me.
So as part of today's show, what I think I want to focus on is your story. So your recovery journey, where you're at now, and what led to all this in the beginning. And I know you now help other women in recovery, so I was thinking we could just use your story as the basis for our chat and just see where that goes. So I guess starting off, what was food like growing up in your household?
Okay, well, first off, thank you so much for giving this space for people to come and share, because I know how helpful it was for me in my recovery to hear other people's story and just to know that I wasn't alone and I wasn't going crazy, because that's how it felt a lot of the time, that I was just crazy. So thank you for creating this space and the work that you do. But let's see, if we take it way back when I was a kid, I was just a normal eater. And I find this a lot with my clients too. Like, some people can't even go way back. They don't even have a time where they could remember even having a time of normalcy around food and around their body, because they were put on a diet at such a young age, or their parents put them on Weight Watchers, or their parents were, and just hated themselves and put that mindset onto the kids at such a young age. They don't really know anything of normalcy. So, maybe my normalcy as a kid could help someone else, because even if you can't remember a place of normalcy, like, you can get back to a place of normalcy around food. I guess normalcy, what I mean by that is just not feeling crazy and uncontrollable around food to where it's always on your mind, and you can't even be present in your relationships because you just start thinking about food and you feel guilty around food, but you have these strong cravings that just seem to control you. So, that wasn't always a thing for me in my life. I was just, I ate the foods that I wanted, and I was an active kid. I had so much energy that my parents were like, okay, you gotta, go in sports and music and all kinds of things. And I didn't really think much about food or my body until, later on, certain things happen, which seems to happen a lot nowadays. Certain people make comments about you. So that started in elementary school. Certain friends would, comment on my body. And I never thought of that. And so that brought it into my mind, like, oh, well, is this something I should be concerned about? Like, I didn't think there was a problem. But the disordered eating or me trying to change my diet didn't really start until I was a teenager, I guess around 13. And that's when I found that if I was able to not eat so much, then I would get smaller. And, so it's like, why did I ever want or have that desire to get smaller? I think, it's common for people. Many things contributed to that, the movies I was watching, the TV shows I was watching, the magazines I was reading, then having a first relationship and being betrayed, with a friend, and I attributed that to her being smaller. That's what it must have been, and certain things led to these mindsets that formed a lot of insecurities and the beliefs that, I wasn't good enough, so I needed to change something, and that, my value and success lied in how small I was, and then later on to how fit I could be or how healthy I could be and how I looked and how attractive I could be. It was all based around vanity. And so later on, as a teenager, that's when I didn't really implement clean eating yet, but I was not eating breakfast and lunch, and I would just have something at night, and then I was put on Adderall for my ADHD, and I found that was an appetite suppressant. So I abused that, and then so later on that led me to, so I had that mindset of my value and worth came from a smaller body or, my appearance.
And with that, the value and worth being you being smaller or your appearance, was any of that being modeled at home, in terms of your parents or other siblings?
Yeah, so it's weird because I never really noticed it until I went through my recovery and I had that time to reflect, where did this all come from? And that was definitely a contributing factor because, I love my family, but a lot of them, pretty much all of them are based around vanity. That's always the talk of the home. Some kind of diet was being implemented or, exercise and looking a certain way, or people shaming themselves oh, I need to go on a diet, or, oh, I need to lose this weight, or, oh, I've gained a bunch of weight, that kind of talk all the time, which hasn't really changed much. But, you get to a point where it doesn't really affect you. But totally as a vulnerable kid and then teenager, that's the mindsets that I picked up subconsciously. So I think it, obviously fed into all of that. And being encouraged by family members to, sexualize myself, that's where, my purpose was. It sounds funny now looking back, but, certain family members encouraging me to be a Playboy model or a Hooters waitress, that kind of stuff, and so, yeah, that totally contributed to it. And then the people that I was hanging around, they were all talking about that, and yeah, so later on, I had a boyfriend at that time too that was into bodybuilding. So, he would always talk about that. And at first I thought it was super weird and unnatural and kind of freaky. But then, as time goes on, when you're around something long enough, it, wears on you.
Yeah.
So things weren't going good with that relationship as a teenager. And so I was like, oh, well, bodybuilding or fitness. So I started to get into fitness a little bit. But then I realized like it wasn't just about that relationship, but then it turned into like I'm just being healthy. This is better than like taking alcohol or taking Adderall and then like drinking alcohol and partying and all that, which was another thing that happened as a teenager. And so that's why I started going to the gym here and there. And I just started, changing my diet a little bit. And, of course, like the body starts to change a little bit. And that's when compliments started rolling in. And I was like, oh, okay, well, see, the attention does come from this, or the, what's the word? The validation does come from this, Yeah. So I kept going, and, at first it was just like, making small changes here and there. And then it crossed that fine line where it became like this obsession because nothing ever was good enough. Cause it was like, okay, I got to keep going now and I got to keep doing more. And what else can I do? And I started researching and, it was like, turned into diets like, cut the carbs and up the protein, that kind of stuff. And, do certain exercise regimes to optimize on fat loss and, all that kind of stuff. So it became just like this obsession.
And so when did you first get into the bodybuilding, and how long did it then take to ramp up into that obsession?
That was still as like a teenager. I think I was like 19 or 20 and I was getting into that. And, my mom was obviously pushing for that, like, yeah, like go to the gym and get a trainer and all of that stuff. And so I slowly, because it was a small gym and I got close with like the owner and stuff. And he started bringing up the fitness competitions. And at first I was like, nah, I'm just going to do this, for myself. But I was still like doing my own things, like creating meal plans for myself and doing crazy exercise things, like just being at the gym for hours a day. So they're like, you might as well just do a fitness competition. And finally, like after a year, I gave into that and I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. Like, it's not a big deal. I'll just train for it. And then that's it. So, that's not how it played out though, because as I started training more and I had to change my diet more and just do like fasted cardio and certain things, it became so miserable. And I was already starting to deal with certain digestive problems, like severe bloating and gas and constipation and all of that stuff. And I started to just get super fatigued, but I would still push myself to go to the gym. And what else? I was starting to feel dizzy and I was fainting like here and there. And so, yeah, as I continued to train for the competition, things just got worse, the digestive problems got worse. It was that kind of bloating where you feel like you're 9 months pregnant, and I tried so many different gimmicks to try to cure the bloat, but it only got worse. And so then I started to, the obsession around food became more prominent. And, I forgot what it was like at this point, to be a normal eater, to not focus on food rules and diet manipulations. And my appetite just continued to increase with that insatiable appetite. Like no matter how much you would eat, because you would have cheat meals or cheat days, right? Where you just binge and just eat as much as you could. And you would physically be stuffed, but you would mentally still be wanting more food, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I didn't know anything different. I thought that was just part of it. And I was just becoming addicted to junk food and I was developing binge eating disorder. And, I said that I had obesity genes, so I had to control my diet indefinitely and, all of that stuff. But yeah, so after the competition, it just like, I couldn't control myself anymore, that control with quotations.
Yeah.
And so it's just like I just went crazy and I couldn't stop eating. And I would try to get back on the diet, get back on the exercise regime, and then I would end up binging. And it was just this crazy cycle that I couldn't come to terms with. And I just felt like I was going crazy, and that, I went to counselors and I went to doctors and I tried to get tests for things, because not only was I feeling crazy around food and I thought I had binge eating disorder, but, I had all these physical problems that had started to develop through this crazy, like the clean dieting and the fitness, the over exercising. So like I was saying, the digestive issues, but my hair was falling out. I didn't have my period. I had a bowel obstruction after the competition. Just all of these different symptoms. And so the doctors couldn't find anything. And so they just wanted to prescribe me like medication, because it was just an emotional problem or something, because they couldn't find anything wrong.
And was that the same with the counselors? When you were seeing counselors, were they saying it's all in your head, there's nothing wrong?
Yeah, and then I just had to, get more willpower. That's, I had this addiction and I was going to go to Overeaters Anonymous and stuff like that. So I didn't know anything about recovery. I didn't, and people in that community, because I'd built up like this fitness community, and they were just like, oh, you probably are just doing something wrong. You're not doing it right. There's something wrong with your diet, or, you need to change something. And I was just like, no, like I'm doing everything right, because that's typically our personalities, right? Like we're extreme perfectionists to the T. And so I was just really defeated and lost. And then obviously that created a lot of depression and anxiety and so much stuff like that. So obviously this pushed me into trying to, not just try to be healthy and fit now. I was trying to be, or for vanity reasons, I was trying to be healthy now to try to heal myself. So I embarked on all of these different kinds of healing protocols, like GAPS and ketogenic and cleansing and juicing and veganism and raw veganism, like anything, low food map, low oxalates, all those different kinds of diets out there. And the symptoms just got worse. The bloating got worse. The food cravings, they were always there. At one point I had convinced myself that I had changed my palate and I wasn't, I didn't crave food anymore until later on. And I had some of like pasta or something. And then it just like unleashed the beast. And I, was binging a lot again. And I forgot I was purging as well. So I had developed or whatever. I was bulimic because I was just so upset with myself that I was binging and I couldn't control myself. So I would purge both like via mouth and via exercise to try to like get off all those calories. And so then I went through all of that craziness, the diet escapades. And so the constipation got worse, and I had to rely on daily enemas every single day because I couldn't go on my own. I wasn't able to sleep at night. Hair continued to fall out, all of those things. Like the list goes on and on. I can't even remember right now, but I see this so common with people that are on these diets. And so, just eventually, years later, I kind of accidentally stumbled into recovery. It was a slow process because, I just ended up losing control again or whatever. Like my body took over and it was like, yo, we need a lot of food or else we're going to die. So it just created that binge response to get a lot of food in as quickly as possible. And I just couldn't control it anymore. So, at one point I was just so sick of everything, sick and exhausted of trying to control my food and control my body that I just gave in. I was like, whatever, and I just went on like this several month-long binge. And so, that kind of slowly led me into recovery and asking certain questions, still being obsessive, Googling stuff like, what's wrong with me? Why am I retaining water? Why am I binging? Like, how to overcome food addiction, all those things. And then it just slowly led me into recovery sources. And I was like, oh my gosh, other people are actually going through this. I'm not going crazy. This is actually like a biological instinct to starvation, which all these diets are a form of starvation and all of that stuff. And so it led me into recovery. And it was that was just the beginning of like that long healing process,
Yeah. So can I just ask some questions just around where you've kind of described up to at this point?
Yeah.
So like during the phase in which you're like, okay, now I'm going to get healthy. I'm going to try all these different things to help with my digestion or to help with the various symptoms. Were you still training? Were you still doing, physique competitions, that kind of thing?
I ended up stopping just because it was so miserable to go through the fitness competition prep. I just literally couldn't do it. And I kind of just dropped off the face of the planet with my coach and my workout partners and just everyone. And like, cause I had a website around that and I had clients and I just couldn't do it anymore. And I felt like that imposter syndrome or something. So yeah, I just ended up just stopping that. And I did continue to try to exercise though, as for a while, like when I was still trying to burn off the extra calories or burn off the binge, those kinds of things. So after a year though, I found some source. I think it was when I found raw veganism and detoxing, where they were talking about how you should give your body a break from exercise while you try to heal and detox. So I stopped training there, and I didn't really start again until, later on when I was trying ketogenic and intermittent fasting, and I was trying to, do HIIT workouts again with trying to do that, like super fatigued though. So yeah, I did take a while off of exercise, but I was so like malnourished that, my body wasn't even able to heal at that point.
Sure.
So yeah.
And with you mentioned there you used to have a previous website, and so I assume like doing a lot of this stuff online and putting up photos. And you said at some point you felt like an imposter, but at some point in the early days, did it feel like this was genuinely you, or there was always a kind of a mask? Yeah,
it was always like it wasn't really me. A lot of the things, even since a teenager, I was always like a really nerdy kid, and I just found it was easier at one point to just try to fit in and do what I thought I should in order to be successful or be attractive or, just be so I became something that I wasn't, to try to please others and try to, it was totally to put on an act, but at those times you can almost put on an act so much to where you believe it yourself, So later on, and when I went through recovery, that it's almost like that fog lifted, or the fog goggles. I've explained it before, and it's almost like, oh my gosh, like what have I been doing? And so, but at that point, imposter syndrome in the sense of like, when I found like cleansing and all of that, I realized, oh wait, this actually wasn't healthy. This was actually creating a lot of problems. But it wasn't later until recovery when I really understood that, I don't know, I guess it's hard to explain. But just imposter syndrome, because I just felt like that wasn't me to pose half nude and do photo shoots and do fitness. Like that was so uncomfortable for me anyways. I hated doing photo shoots, but I thought it was what I should do. And I was getting, compliments from it, and people were, applauding that. And I was like, oh yeah, well, this is what I should be doing then. And
with that website, like, were you a personal trainer or were you a nutritionist, or what were you doing back then? Was it just a place to show off photos or show off what you were doing?
Yeah, so it started out as just like, an Instagram account of fitness, and then it started, picking up, and so I was like, okay, I guess I'll do something with this, and I created a website, and then, created a Facebook account, and then I started doing consulting because people were like, well, what are you doing? What are you eating? What does your exercise look like? And at that point, I was like so obsessed with it. I created stuff around it. I wasn't doing nutrition at that point, but this is another point that I see a lot of people in this go through, is that's what created this sense of like, okay, I'm going to become a nutritionist. So I started going to school to become a nutritionist. And I was studying nutrition. I was already doing a lot on my own. So I was like, I might as well get a degree on this, So yeah, but that was never really me. Like as a kid, like I never was passionate about that. So just because I was so obsessed with it, it was like a false passion.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what led me into getting like a nutrition degree, and then going to become like a holistic nutritionist. And then through recovery, I realized like I couldn't do that anymore. Not only was I losing passion for it, because I was like, oh, well, nutrition is a lot simpler. Like I don't have to be so obsessive. And it was also just kind of triggering in recovery to try to recover, and then also still be like thinking about nutrition all of the time.
And were you ever talking to friends or partners or anything about this, or was this really your secret, all the struggles you were going through?
So at first it was a secret, or I guess it wasn't really a secret. I was just like, I thought a lot of people just dealt with that. I thought a lot of people just were always like in that fight with their body and fight with food and, the fight with willpower. So I just, didn't really think of anything of it. I was like, this is just what life is, And then later on, when I was, when did I start talking to someone about it? When I stopped the fitness competition, I tried to like make an announcement. I tried to tell people like, don't believe what you see in these photos. Like, even if they look perfect, I was miserable. And I talked to a lot of people after the competition, and they felt the same way, but nobody was talking about it. So I had that passion later on to be like, these photos that you see on social media, even if they look perfect, like a lot of the people are suffering. Even if they're smiling, it doesn't mean that they're happy. And it's created a lot of dysfunction with comparisonitis and everyone comparing their lives to other people on social media, or comparing their bodies to other people, even if they're not even feeling healthy and they're not even really into fitness. They're just miserable and suffering, because this was actually pretty common. I found out that people were just binge eating in secret, or, struggling with digestive problems and hair loss and hormone problems, but it just wasn't being talked about. So, I tried at first to bring that up right after the competition, but nobody wanted to hear it. Like I said, like people were just saying, oh, you're just doing something wrong, So, but later on, that's what has kind of driven down the diets. And what I do now is to spread that message. And yeah, because I just see that so much with people, unfortunately. But yeah, social media can be used for good if you do choose to do that. But, if you feel drained and insecure and like you're comparing yourself to other people, then it's, not beneficial or productive in any way,
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. And so you talked a little about then getting into your recovery. So can you go through that a little more? So you said that it was kind of a month or a couple of months long binge of just eating all the food, but yeah, how did it then go from there?
So yeah, that was another chaotic experience, because it was really scary because my body was changing. And so all those insecurities and fears came up, and I was eating a lot of food because I just couldn't control it. My body was asking for so much food, and all the foods that had that had been off limits for so long, those were the foods I was craving in very large quantities. And I saw that, you've talked about the Minnesota starvation experiment.
Yeah.
That is exactly me. That was me. I was eating like 10,000 calories a day, if not more. And that's what actually really helped to calm my mind so I could be okay with what was happening, or just to understand. Because I was facing the same symptoms as the men in this Minnesota starvation experiment. But also my body was just changing. So I was gaining weight really quick, but also facing really bad water retention and edema. So in my ankles and my knees and in my face and all over. And I couldn't find a lot of sources on that. So I thought for the longest time in the beginning of my recovery that I was just going into kidney failure or heart failure and all that stuff. But really it was a beneficial part in my recovery, part of the healing process that I found out later. So I was dealing with that.
Did you get a lot of pain with the edema as well?
Totally. Yeah, that's another thing, is joint pain all over. So especially in my feet and knees. So even if I tried to get up out of bed just to walk across the hall to go to the bathroom, it was like knives stabbing in the bottoms of my feet. Like, it was so bad. And then for a while there, though, I was like, oh, it's just because I'm gaining weight, and, I need to get this weight off because it's making me unhealthy and it's causing all this joint pain. And so, yeah, I went through a while there, which is what I call, and a lot of people call, quasi-recovery, because you're like trying to do recovery, but you're still like trying to lose weight, or you're going back and forth between restriction and recovery, or between like over exercising and trying to recover. And you're fighting this battle in your mind where you feel like, you should go back to your diet and you need to lose weight, but then you're like, no, I need to recover, or I don't have a choice, I have to recover. So it's this chaotic battle that you have to go through, the mental recovery along with the physical recovery. Yeah. And so, yeah, that happened for quite some time, but I found eventually that the joint pain relieved itself on its own, and I still was at a higher weight in my recovery. So, then I was able to realize, like, it wasn't the weight or my body changing. It was just part of the healing process. It's kind of like, I don't know if you've used this analogy before, but if you, stub your toe, your body produces pain, inflammation, and swelling, as a communication tool to be like, okay, you need to stay off of that right now so we can heal it. We can tend to it. And that's the same thing kind of that happens to your body in recovery, but just all over. And that's why you feel like you've been hit by a train and you're retaining water and you're swelling, and, you store some fat as a, conservation technique, because your body thinks that it's going to be starved again in the future because it's been starved for either 6 months or a year or 5 years or 20 years, So yeah, the joint pain though is a big one for people. But it did go away for me.
And with you seeing a therapist, so I know you said like initially you saw counselors and they really didn't help at all. Like, at some point as part of this recovery, did you then find some outside support?
Yeah, so I had read a lot on cognitive behavioral therapy, and I tried to go to a therapist, and they did help me a little bit with like body image, and they challenged certain beliefs. So that was helpful. And then I stopped going. And then later on, I ended up going back. So I did go in and out to therapy, and that did help with like those deeper roots. Because, a lot of this healing, like at first you kind of just have to physically recover because you're so malnourished, you can't even think about that stuff. But then once you start to get food to and nourish your brain and body, you can kind of begin to think about that stuff again. And that is so helpful for long-term sustainable recovery, is to really, get to the root and the bottom of why you even got into this in the first place. So yeah, that totally helped me.
And were there any particular techniques within cognitive behavioral therapy that you really liked or really helped you?
Mainly what went on is I just would talk to them about certain beliefs that I had, and they would just challenge me on those beliefs, or they went back into childhood and, asked where that stemmed from, or, if someone had hurt me in some way as an early child, and to really feel those feelings rather than to just like try to intellectualize them and try to overthink them, and just really feel them and not try to suppress them anymore. And a lot of things just slowly over time, like, peeling back the layers of the onion, certain things just continued to come up. And that's really my experience. And I know that there's a lot of other therapists and different techniques. So, I think I found the most benefit with like a trauma therapist.
Okay.
And that's what helped, is like just, really going back and really unraveling what went on and what has contributed to certain beliefs and the lies that we pick up as children and we've come to believe as our truth and our identity. But then as an adult, we have to, kind of parent ourselves again through this stuff and, unlearn those lies that we've believed to be true for so long, and really question every intention behind every decision and every thought that comes in. So that's what I learned a lot from that. And that was really helpful.
And you said as well that, this is a big part, like all the vanity piece was such a big part of your growing up and your life and your family and your friends. And so as part of recovery, how did you navigate all that? Was that you almost shutting yourself away from everyone? What did it look like?
Yeah, because it's a lot of recovery. I think there's a lot of deeper learning lessons, of really challenging ourselves and this identity that we've created about ourselves that is a false identity, and really breaking down that ego and the pride that we kind of use sometimes as protective mechanisms because we don't want to get hurt again. And, we want to be independent and all of this stuff. But the breakdown of the ego and the identity in recovery is huge. And I did have to kind of separate myself. And I went through different periods of separating myself. So as a teenager or going into my 20s, I had to separate myself from the friends that I was partying with, alcohol and drugs and all that. And then another part of my life, I had to kind of separate myself from the extreme like fitness and disordered eating people. And then at another point, I had to kind of separate myself from like the extreme raw vegans that were telling me I was a murderer and stuff for going back to animal products, and trying to recover, even though they knew like what was happening physically. And so I did have to go through different periods where I had to, separate myself from friends and even family. So I even took it to the extreme though of moving to Hawaii to get out of the environment. And I'm not saying that everyone has to do that, but I do think that it is helpful to get out of the environment that has contributed to certain mindsets or behaviors, or that just are really triggering. Like I have a lot of clients that were too fitness trainers or, certain things, and it's really hard to recover when you're still in that environment.
Yeah.
So it's relative to the individual, but I think, for a while, some people, not all, but typically people kind of just naturally gravitate towards being like a hermit for a while because they're so vulnerable and like they're trying to heal themselves and get to the roots and question themselves and create their true identity again. And it can be really hard to do that when you're still subjecting yourself to the things that have contributed to the disorder or the behaviors in the first place. So I totally had to do that. And then you get to a point where you like you feel stronger in yourself again, and you've built this foundation for yourself through recovery, and you can go back out and you have the desire to go back out into the world and then, attract the right kind of people and, yeah. So I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. And so how long into recovery was it before you then decided you need to pack your bags and move to Hawaii?
Well, so actually I packed my bags and moved to Hawaii when I was in the disordered eating still. Okay. I thought I was going to get something completely different than what I went there and found. I thought at that point I was still going back and forth between fruitarianism and then raw veganism, like ketogenic and, that kind of stuff. So I thought like Hawaii was like fruitarian paradise, or, I thought that it was just an abundance over there and it was healthier for me being in the tropics and all of these things. And what I found though was like a lot of people helped me slowly, like, you need to like eat more, or you need to stop being so obsessive with your diet. And, I had people around me kind of trying to nudge me into sanity, and slowly, like, I just was out of control at one point because I didn't have my car yet, and I was living with a friend, and I didn't have anything. I couldn't be so picky on what to eat, and I had to eat. So I had that bowl of pasta, and it freaked me out. Like, I was so paranoid, and I almost had a panic attack, and I was so angry with myself in the situation, but I had it anyways. And then that just awoke my appetite. And for the longest time though, I thought, oh, see, it's just the parasites, or it's the food addiction, or, I'm just a binge eater. And, but as I went through recovery though, I realized that that was not the case.
And so with that, like, as you say, going through recovery and realizing that wasn't the case. So how long did it take? And I know everyone's journey is different, but how long did it take for you to feel like you were coming out the other side, where you're like, okay, I think this is actually working?
Yes, it took a while because, like I said, I went back and forth for quite some time, unfortunately, in that quasi recovery. And so in the beginning, I did it fully, like I did recovery fully, but what triggered me back to trying to go back to, restricting and stuff and over-exercising was the weight gain and the water retention. But for a good while there, I was doing good. I was just, got my period back. My hair stopped falling out. My digestive system was like working again. I was able to have bowel movements on my own within the first, 3 to 5 months, I would say. And then after that, the weight gain freaked me out, and I thought I was becoming unhealthy, and the joint pain was still there, and the water retention was still there. And I was like, okay, I got to do something about this because it means I'm becoming unhealthy. And so for a good another 6 months or so, I was going back and forth, but nothing was changing. My body wasn't changing. It wasn't losing the weight. It was holding on to the weight for dear life and holding on to the water retention, keeping me fatigued, and all of that. So I just got to that point where I talk about on my YouTube, where I just finally committed, like fully again. And I just let go, and I was like, you know what, whatever. Like, nothing's changing. I need to just like commit to recovery 100%. And I don't care what happens anymore because I'm just exhausted and I just cannot do the restriction anymore, and I can't exercise anymore. So I just like let go and saw where it took me. So then another like 6, 8, I started feeling better like within a few months again. And then within another, I would say like 6 months, 8 months, then I was feeling really good and feeling like, I completely, like, most of the things were gone except my, weight was a little still higher, but most everything just had cleared up. And so, I was like, wow, this recovery thing does work. And I saw so many people not believing in it and struggling and suffering that, I wanted to write a book, and then I wanted to help people because I had finally found something. For so many years I was suffering, and I never thought that I could be free from that and become a normal eater again and get my health back and, get my digestion back and, heal my metabolism and heal my hormones and get my period back and all that stuff. And it happened. So that's what led me into doing that, damn the diets. Yeah.
And with that, was there a pause where you're like, you know what, maybe I want to do something completely different with my life? Like, I want to just leave this behind, or was there, I don't know, just this feeling of I really need to do this?
Yeah, there was a period where I was just like enjoying life again because I got my health back, and I was just like, this is great. And I felt like a kid again, with energy and joy and laughter again, and my health and eating food and not feeling crazy around it. So yeah, there was just that point where I didn't really feel, passionate to create something about it. So I guess that went on for like a year, I guess. And then after that, I was like, I need to like share this, because I just kept seeing people struggle and suffer. And then people were asking me like, from certain communities like raw veganism or ketogenic. And I was trying to, I was still in those Facebook groups, and they were like, well, what did you do? Like, I'm still suffering like years later, and they're still in the same place. And I was like, this is a real issue. And so I guess that it sparked that. And yeah, so ever since it's hard because there's a lot of pushback, it's so different. Not a lot of people talk about this. But I don't know, I just felt called to spread the message.
And what you said about pushback there. So what is the pushback that you normally get? Is it like that you're promoting unhealthiness or is it something else?
Yeah, sometimes it's that, like, or sometimes it's just like, no, I could like never trust my body, or, no, you always have to be on a diet, or yeah, I guess what you're saying too, though, like you're just going to be unhealthy forever and this is never going to stop. And yeah, just those kinds of things, which I questioned as well a lot. I thought that there was no way like I could ever eat processed foods again, or eat fats, or eat carbs, or eat just the foods that I craved, and that the draw to them, the binge desire, the strong cravings, the extreme hunger towards certain foods would like lose their novelty. I never, so I totally understand why there's pushback or there's people that question it, but I guess that's why I do it though, is because, there is freedom from all of that.
Yeah. And what are there particular resources that you found through your journey that really, helped or opened your eyes and allowed you to either trust your body or trust the process?
Yeah, like we were talking about before, Matt Stone's books really helped me. That was like the first thing. And I was in this fruitarian recovery group for a while. And that was like a first step. But then Matt Stone was recommended to me, and that really helped me. And then I found blogs like the edinstitute.org, I think it is. And that just really helped me. That answered a lot of my questions and kept me going. Oh, and then who else? Well, I guess this wasn't in my recovery, but like towards the end, I really found Follow the Intuition, Alyssa Oris. Really beneficial. She's really balanced and just, had a similar experience, and she's on YouTube and has a book as well.
Okay, cool. And so what came first with you? Was it writing the book, or was it the website and starting to work with people? How did it all unfold in terms of the business?
The book came first. That was the first thing, because I always loved to write as a kid. So, that sparked that passion, when you get you start healing, you start getting reconnected with certain passions again. And I was like, I got to write a book. And so then the book came out, and then I started an Instagram, Damn the Diets, to go with the book. And then after the Instagram, I was like, you know what? YouTube helped me, so I'm gonna start a YouTube. And then I started sharing videos on there, and then I created the website so that I could have a blog. And then from there, I started getting clients that wanted help because they could relate. And then it just kind of unfolded. And then I made my first course on it so that people that couldn't work with me could access a course. And then I made another course, and it kind of just all unraveled like that.
Okay. And are the people you're seeing largely where their story matches up with yours, or is there kind of real differences?
In my clients?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's people from all over. So I've had the honor to learn about things that I didn't really go through, like severe anorexia. But I've found that like people going through anorexia or diet recovery, it's so similar. Like the physical recovery symptoms, the mental recovery, and a lot of the same things are seen all across the board, whether you're recovering from anorexia, yo-yo dieting, bulimia, orthorexia, just being a chronic dieter or an over-exerciser. So yeah, I've been really fortunate to work with those people as well. And people are getting their periods back all the time and getting their lives back. And it's awesome.
Yeah.
So.
And I think there are definitely some differences as you move further along the continuum, but you're right. Like the symptoms that people get from restriction and the symptoms that people get as part of recovery are very similar.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I'm just trying to think if there was anything else I wanted to ask. I mean, it's really great being able to hear about your story. Is there anything we didn't chat about that you wanted me to ask you, or that you want to be able to share with my audience?
I think that, sums it up. I'm sure that I left out things, but yeah, for now, I think that's about it.
So I guess the final question then is, where can people be going if they want to be finding out more information about you?
So I'm more active on my YouTube, which is just Kayla Rose Kotecki, or my website, damnthediets.com.
Okay. Well, I will put all the links in the show notes, and people can check it out. But thank you so much for coming on, Kayla, and telling your story and all the information that you've been able to provide.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thanks for listening to Real Health Radio. If you are interested in more details, you can find them at the 7 Health website. That's www.7health.com.